Thank you, Andrew, and thank you all for coming. I would first like to introduce all of the candidates from my far right, representing the BC Green Party, Andrew Weaver. Representing the BC NDP, Jessica Vanderveen. Representing the BC Liberal Party, Ida Chung. And representing the BC Conservatives, Greg Kazikoff. So let's have a round of applause. Thank them for So as Andrew mentioned, we will start with an introduction. All of the candidates are going to be given 3 minutes to make their opening statements. Our timer will be Reese. If you raise your hand there, Reese will let us know. He'll give us a 30-second notice, candidates. Of course, you don't need to take up all that time, but he's going to be the host. We will then move into the question session, as Andrew mentioned. If you have questions to ask, please be sure to fill out one of the yellow cards, which is on the table in the back there. We'll try our best to address them, and of course the Twitter feed. The candidates will have a minute and a half to answer the questions. So the order of the opening statements. Let's see. We'll call them all out. So first will be Ida. Second will be Jessica. Third is Andrew. And who's the fourth? Okay. Perfect. So there we go. Ida John, please.
Well, firstly, I want to thank the Coalition for hosting this forum and for all the nonprofit organizations for coming out and displaying their exhibits. I think it's important and relevant that you have an opportunity to do that. I certainly picked up some material, so thank you very much for that. I do want to acknowledge the traditional territory of Coast Salish people, whose the university lands are situated on, and for which we're able to have our business take place here and conduct this forum. I want to begin by saying that we are fortunate and actually blessed to live in a province of British Columbia and the country of Canada that is actually rich in abundance of natural resources. And that has been the case for many, many years, and that we actually can make a living off of our natural resources. We are a resource-based province. We also have other industries that we are able to grow and ensure that it builds our economy. And with that, you would think that we would have all the resources we need to in fact eliminate homelessness and certainly poverty. And nothing would give me more pleasure to actually see that take place. So why is it that we still have the issue of homelessness and poverty taking place? It's because successive governments, none of them have had the absolute correct solution. It takes working with the community and it takes partnership to make sure that we have the right plan in the right region to make sure we have the right solution. I can tell you that our province has developed a number of regional poverty plans because one size do not fit all. I don't have right now for you the information as to which ones are working better than others because it is still being implemented in some areas. But I do know that the communities that are able to implement them are pleased that we actually are taking some action in those areas. I also want to say that the issue of homelessness and affordable housing need to be linked in a way that it's not just about building with 4 walls and a roof. And perhaps housing used to be seen that way in the past. But it is about making sure that we have support services there. I was really happy to pick up the Camas Garden exhibit, and I was there at the opening. And this is the new way of providing assistance for people. Support services, staff are on site 24/7. 20 years ago, if you built affordable housing or public housing, it was just built. But people didn't have the support services. That's what's important. That's what we can continue to build on. Have we done everything we can? No. Is there more to do? Absolutely. And I'm committed to continuing to work to build on improving the plan we have and to continue to working with the nonprofit organizations in our community. Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
Oh, we have a projector.
Yeah.
I think I'll come over
Sure.
by you for a moment, because that's a little blinding. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I'm glad to be here this afternoon, and I wanted to thank the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness and the Poverty Law Club for organizing this very important forum. It's an important part of the democratic process. I'm very pleased to participate in it. Can everyone hear me easily? Okay, good. I've got allergies, so right now I sound like I just drank a bottle of scotch, but I assure you that I didn't. I got involved in politics because of my belief in the value of public services and my belief in the people of Obey-Gordon Head. I've been a tireless advocate for education and skills training. I fought for quality of life and quality of care for seniors, and I believe in protecting our coast against oil spills. Over the last few months, I've knocked on thousands of doors and talked to thousands of constituents. One message came through loud and clear. People from all walks of life are saying it's time for a change. This election is about a choice. More of the same or change for the better. More of the same means continuing with the worst child poverty levels in Canada. Change for the better means giving better support for children and building ladders of opportunity. Change means a legislated poverty reduction plan with timelines and targets and public reporting. More of the same means more of the highest levels of inequality in Canada. Change for the better means raising incomes for low-income families. The choice is clear. More of the same failed BC Liberal policies, or a new government with better priorities that will bring about the change that British Columbians want. A strong voice for our community in that government. We can do better. You can do better. The people who couldn't even afford to come here to this debate today, we can do better for them. What does change for the better mean? Change for the better means getting the fundamentals right and focusing on what matters. Our number one priority is education and skills training. With 80% of BC's new jobs requiring some form of post-secondary education, we have to build ladders of opportunity for every British Columbian. That's how we'll build a sustainable economy, create good jobs, attract investment, and build a strong middle class. And change for the better means spelling out exactly how we will pay for our plans. I look forward to hearing directly from all of you. If you believe, like I do, that it's time for a positive change and a strong NDP voice in Obey-Gordon Head, then I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Weaver. I see what you mean from the light. I'm a faculty member here at the University of Victoria, and I've worked here since 1992. I grew up in Victoria. I was born in Victoria, and when I was a child in Victoria, homelessness was just simply not an issue. Something has changed. What is it that's changed in our society that we now allow a problem like homelessness to become a plague upon our society? It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for many reasons. In the language of many taxpayers, it's unacceptable from a financial reason. It costs about, from the numbers that I was told after visiting our place about 2 weeks ago, it costs about $55,000 for each person who is homeless on the streets. It would cost about $8,000 per person through the Streets to Home program to actually provide affordable housing to these people. It makes business sense to deal with this problem, not only social sense to deal with this problem. The Green Party of BC is focused on solutions. We are focused on finding what the issues are, obtaining the evidence, and then making decisions based on evidence. My role as an MLA representing the Green Party of BC would be to advocate on behalf of the citizenship of this riding, but also to raise issues in the legislature which would not otherwise be raised, and to demand evidence and to work with other parties to ensure that decisions are based on evidence. The evidence is very clear. that we need to deal with the homelessness problem from a social perspective as well as a financial perspective. And I give you a pledge here today that I would work on behalf of all the citizens of Oak Bay to do my bit to try to end this problem. Finally, I'll say that in touring our place, it's very clear to me that we have some fantastic success stories. But success stories are not enough. There has to be a will within the government to ensure that we deal with this problem. I believe that the NDP government does want to deal with this problem, and I will, again, as a second pledge, agree to work with them to try to solve it. With that, I thank you for your attention, for being here, and I thank the Coalition and the Poverty Law Club for actually hosting this very important event for a very precious weekend to me, Earth Day weekend. Thank you.
Great.
My name is Greg Kazakov. I am representing the BC Conservative Party. I don't have the big advertising budgets like the other parties do, so I think I would like to take a few moments to tell you a bit about myself so you know what kind of person I am. First of all, thanks for coming out on such a beautiful day. Hard to spend your Saturdays indoors listening to people like myself, but nonetheless, I thank you. I've been a chartered accountant for 25 years, and I made a career out of auditing municipal, provincial, and federal organizations and advising them on how they can improve their financial management. I've also worked in the BC government in a senior financial capacity for the BC Ministry of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliations, with which I was quite familiar with, and a senior financial management position with the Ministry of Labour and Citizen Services, as well as I was the regional director for the BC Public Guardian and Trustee. In all these government jobs, I found serious and significant financial management problems. And that's one of the reasons why I got into politics, because I think I know how to fix many of them. But just so you don't think that I'm all about money and the bottom line, I'd like to let you know that for over 40 years, I've volunteered my time to charitable organizations. I'll just give you a little brief list of them. I was the chairman of the Unemployment Action Committee, chairman of the Coalition for Support of People on Welfare, the chairman of the Center for Income Security and Employment Association. I provided free income tax preparation services to a number of different senior citizen groups. And I was on the board of directors of the Financial Management Institute of Canada, and was the chair of their Strategic Partnership Committee. That organization promotes best practices in government in financial management. I was also the treasurer for Surrounded by Cedar, which is a local First Nations group providing social services to Aboriginal urban youth, and most recently a volunteer community advisor for the Victoria Foundation, which is the premier non-government funder of charities on South Vancouver Island. I have received a federal government certificate of merit acknowledging my many years of volunteer contributions to the Canadian charitable community, as well as was nominated for Citation for Citizenship, and last year, again, nominated for the Order of BC. Later on, I'd like to talk to you about two specific public works projects that I was involved in and their success. And so if you're looking for a guy who's good with numbers, has an extensive history of caring for the communities in which he lives, and has successful outcomes with public housing, then I urge you to vote for me in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our candidates. So we will start with our questions, and what we'll do is we'll do an order around the table. So I'll just direct. We will start actually at the far end of the table. Again, everyone has a minute and a half. We won't have the opportunity to give you a 30-second notice, so it'll just be a minute and a half. The first question from the yellow cards here. What is your party's platform on child poverty? Specific ideas, please. Starting with Andrew, when you're ready.
Thank you. I would also like to direct people to the questions that you provided by email. as we put an enormous amount of effort into researching the actual input for those questions as well. So I hope people get a chance to look at that. In terms of child poverty, of course we believe that it's unacceptable that British Columbia is the second worst child poverty in the country. It was the worst up until this year. We have the dubious task of being second worst now. This is the problem that needs to be dealt with. The NDP have put forward a policy in terms of providing more income for child supplements. This is a good start. We would support that. However, we're concerned about the fiscal oversight of that particular policy as to where that money is coming from. So in terms of dealing with child poverty, one of the key things, of course, is assistance with income for low-income people. And so we would support the NDP on that particular position.
Next, Jessica.
Thank you. The NDP is committed to a reduction of child poverty, including a larger commitment in child care, support for child care, but we do have some specific numbers as well. Increases in a child benefit that would be average around $70 a month for each child. For parents with incomes up to $60,000. And that support would last until the child was 18 years old. Right now, the Liberals have support for children with parents of incomes up to $120,000, but it only lasts until they're 6 years old. We want to increase that support considerably, and we want to make sure that that support is there for children right up until they're 18 years of age. We're also increasing support for child care spaces, and this will reduce the average cost of child care spaces about $2,000 a year, which will immediately mean there's a much greater number of families that will have access to good child care. And obviously this is the way out of poverty, because if you have access to better child care, then you have access to the possibility to work if you can afford the child care. Thank you.
Ida.
Thank you. Well, I believe the best way you can help a child come out of poverty is to actually allow their parents to have the ability to have a good job, so that they can make the choices that their family, that best meets the needs of their family. So I think what is important is that we continue to find ways to help people get jobs, to help them with their training, the skill sets that they need. There are going to be jobs available. It's anticipated that there will be 1 million job vacancies over the course of the next 10 years. And it's important that what we are able to do to help those children is indeed to help the parents avail themselves of those jobs. I want to speak about the poverty rate for a moment, because what is lost on this is that there has been, and I know it's hard to believe, but there has been a dramatic and a consistent decline in our poverty rate since 2003. In fact, our poverty rate has actually dropped by about 45%. That's not to say that it's what we have currently is still not high, but there has been, in fact, a decrease. 75,000 children have been lifted out of poverty since that time. So you can imagine there must have been that many more people or more children who are in poverty. There is still much to do. But as I say, it is important that we help parents find a way that they can support their families, good supporting jobs that they can have so they can make the choices they need to help their children.
Thank you. Greg.
Thank you. The BC Conservative Party really believes in having a strong social safety net for the citizens of BC, and particularly those who are disadvantaged. One of the things we've looked at is an increase in the welfare rates and indexing of them so that these kinds of payments that they can receive stay in step with things like inflation. We want to have some income exemptions for child support payments for single parents, and we certainly would increase funding for First Nation child welfare services. We want to create a commission on tax reform. We want to examine tax reform very closely, because we don't think that all the taxes that we currently collected are fair to the people, particularly with those in low-income situations. And ultimately, what we want to do is address the demand for affordable housing and eliminate homelessness. Now, of course, poverty and homelessness has been with us for thousands of years. I mean, dealing with this issue since time immemorial. Do the BC Conservatives have all the answers? Will child poverty and homelessness disappear after you elect a BC Conservative government? Probably not, but we'll certainly do our best to ensure that we address it as best we can. Thank you.
That was the first question. Thank you, candidates, for being so good with time. That's fantastic. And Andrew, thank you for reminding us. Just to let everyone here know, the candidates were given 6 questions that they answered, and we posted that on the Greater Victoria Coalition and Homelessness website. So they invested time and effort and energy to answer these questions. So be sure to visit the website and see the answers. Very good. The next question, we'll start with Jessica this round. Women escaping violent relationships all too often end up homeless and in poverty. What will you and your party do to support safer, viable futures for women in BC? And you're ready.
Well, I think that this is a huge question, and it's a multi-strategy answer. So I'll try to touch on a little bit of it in the 90 seconds. First of all, very often women, when they flee their homes and flee violence, are also leaving their money behind and their ability to support themselves behind. So we have said that we will immediately tie all income assistance to the index to inflation. We're also going to raise basic income assistance. Not very much, we're afraid, but we're going to raise it $20 a month. And we're going to also increase the amount that people are allowed to earn when they're on income assistance that won't be clawed back. It's going to be double from $200 a month to $400. So these immediately are things that will enable women who often, as I said, are fleeing with their children to have a bit more money to be able to reestablish themselves. I think, again, the focus on childcare and the focus is on increases for supports for childcare, particularly childcare for children at risk, will also help women who are fleeing violent situations. Very often, it's an economic barrier that leaves women in violent states. And it also happens with elders. Very often, if a woman is in a violent relationship as an elder, she is economically unable to leave.
Ida.
Thank you. So if the issue is about how are we going to address women who are fleeing abusive relationships and especially with children at hand, it is making sure that we have, unfortunately, the support systems in place. There will be women who need to escape those relationships. We need to make sure that they have safe places to go. First and foremost, we need to stabilize their situation for themselves and for their children. Then we need to find a mechanism for them to be able to get back into their own environment if they in fact have left their home. We have to make sure that the justice system, the court system, deals with it appropriately as well, and that the woman and the child are not punished, but in fact the perpetrator, the person who's causing the violence, is the one who's taken under in consideration. I have visited perhaps 50 transition houses during my time in government. I have visited transition houses for senior women, which I found astounding that we had to have in place. Unfortunately, there is violence out there, but I've also seen that violence escalates when there is stress in the family, when there is stress in a relationship, and sometimes that stress is caused when the family does not have enough financial resources to live on. I've seen it happen when jobs are gone and at risk. And that's one of the reasons why we continue to focus on making sure people have the resources they need to take care of their family at all times. And that's what we will continue to work on as well.
Thank you, Fred. Great.
Well, these are all wonderful ideas, and the BC Conservatives support many of them. So I won't reiterate those types of comments, but I would add that the BC Conservatives have a very strong emphasis on justice in our communities. So I think we would try to ensure that women are protected through the legal system from these kinds of abusive relations, and give the power of the police to intervene in situations where women are being abused. Plainly, it's totally unacceptable that anybody suffers abuse, and it particularly is not good when women and young children are the subject of this kind of abuse. So, we support things like transition houses and then the development of self-supporting structures to enable those people to transition from those intermediate houses into self-sustaining relationships with themselves and their children. Thank you.
Andrew?
Thanks. You're getting very consistent answers across all the parties here, and I'm not going to differ from that. Of course, there's two aspects to it, the cause of the violence and the solution to the actual violence. I would also like to see what is causing it. Is there something within the social system that's actually leading to increasing violence against women? Obviously, we need to have in place transition assistance. But I would also like to work with, dealing with many of these issues requires a bottom-up solution in terms of actually engaging communities early on and finding out what the best solution for them is. So I would seek evidence by talking to experts in this field who deal with this issue firsthand, much like I went to our place to actually discuss with the people who work and run that place firsthand to figure out what are some of the barriers to ending the homelessness problem. It's very important to gather the information before making promises that we cannot keep, and that's what I would, again, pledge to do, was develop the information from which to actually base sound policy. Thank you.
Very good. On to the next question. The Royal Commission on the Status of Women identified the Royal Commission on the Status of Women identified the inaccessibility of affordable childcare as a main obstacle to women's economic equality. Would you support a universal childcare program? Starting with Ida, when you're ready.
What the Vista Level platform has offered is to provide a variety of supports for childcare. We have introduced all-day kindergarten, which has also provided families with an opportunity for their children to learn at the earliest stages. We have our hundreds of Strong Start centers around the province as well, again, allowing children to access early learning at the very earliest stages as well. These actually can complement what is out there in terms of our childcare spaces. There seems to be a gap, though, in some of the spaces, and it seems to be in the infant toddler as opposed to some of the older children. What we have said, though, is that parents who are working, especially two-income families who need to be able to take their children to a safe, secure child care facility, need to do it in a way that makes sense in terms of time. We are looking at the school system, at our facilities there, where we can put additional spaces there. So if the child is at school, that there might be a space there, that the parent, when dropping them off, will be able to know that they are secure in those places. Those are some of the innovative new approaches that we need to take, in addition to providing a number of subsidies for low-income families, which we will continue to do.
Thank you. Great.
Again, these are all wonderful ideas. The Conservatives would look at this problem and say, well, we can provide some additional resources to low-income families by making sure that they get adequate child care at a reasonable price. And some of that could even be free based on a means test. So our idea is that if the child or if the family needs some child care services, allowing a single parent to go out and work, they should be able to have that and not have it be an economic drain on their resources. So the government, I believe, has a role to play in that regard, and that's the kind of program that we would put forward to deal with those kinds of situations.
Andrew.
Thanks. The question was very specific. Do I support universal child care? And the answer is very specific, unequivocally yes. But I would like to give a story on this. I was president of our University Faculty Association, and I also was chief negotiator for our university here in 2 bargaining sessions. And the reason why I raise this is because the single most important issue for a small minority of our faculty was historically access to childcare. It is not even in the university, it is a problem. It was not ability to pay at our university. It was even accessibility of a space. We have a childcare crisis in Victoria. There are not enough spaces, even for those willing to pay for it. So universal childcare is a step in the right direction. One of the tragedies of our society is we do not value education in terms of the salaries we pay some of the people doing some of the most important jobs. early childhood educators, childcare providers need support because typically they are not paid at the levels that allow them to sustain themselves and house themselves as well. So I would actually like to see an increased stipends. We can have some leadership from the province to those involved in early childhood education and daycare as a step towards universal childcare. It is an important issue, and in fact, in our negotiations, was the single most important issue, but for a minority of people. And when you have minority rights being negotiated on behalf of the majority, they get forgotten. So I would absolutely support universal childcare. Thank you.
And Jessica?
Thank you. Yes, in the long term, the NDP supports universal childcare. It's not going to be possible for us to do that in the first term. It's just not with the financial situation that we're being left with. But here's what we have said we will do. We will reduce fees for existing licensed infant and toddler care by 20%, saving families an average of $2,000 a year. We'll be investing in early learning and childcare through an Early Years Innovation Fund. The BC Liberals have a program to give 6 to 7-year-olds an early years training, or a BC Training and Education Savings Grant for when they go to university. We think we've got an urgent problem right now. And so we're going to take that money and we're going to put it into early learning. It's fully costed, as is everything in our platform. You can find it all on the website at bcndp.ca. I urge you to go there and have a look at it. Thank you.
All right, so the next question, it's actually two questions that we're combining into one. What is your position on safe consumption and needle exchange sites? And would you support a fixed site for safe injection in the Oak Bay Gordon Head area? And we start with Ray.
Well, yes, the answer is yes, I would. It's pretty simple.
Sounds good. Andrew?
Okay, thank you for the question. This is something that I have actually spent a bit of time on. The reason why I give you some background on this is in Vancouver there was a lot of fuss about the potential closure of safe injection sites as this was taken to court by the federal government. The scientists involved were part of our national science strategy trying to get out the ability to be able to actually make decisions based on evidence. The evidence is very, very clear that safe injection sites save lives, and I've got all sorts of data on that here. I mean, in fact, well, I've got the data. I mean, in terms of the number, it reduces HIV, it reduces death, it makes things safer, it makes the community safer. The evidence is overwhelming on this. So absolutely, I support safe injection sites. Now the question is loaded about Oak Bay Gordon Head, and I don't think that's a fair question, because I don't think you should say that to any community. Would you, top-down, tell a community they have to have it? No. I recognize there's NIMBYism all around, but you cannot do a top-down approach to this. You've got to start at the community level and build support from the community. Otherwise, it'll just be a hot potato, not in my backyard. So yes, I support safe injection sites. Where is the best location? I don't know, but I think it would be important to engage all the various stakeholders. And I think the question about Oak Bay Gordon Head really is not appropriate at this time in light of the fact we haven't discussed it with our constituents.
Thank you. Jessica?
Yes, thank you. I do support this model. I support the 4 pillars model. I think it's very important that we understand it in the context of just having somewhere to go and inject safely is only one piece of the puzzle. We have to have support programs and nutrition programs and the opportunity for people to get clean when they're ready to get clean. All of those things have to be in place. We need better court system that works with people with addictions in a more compassionate and human way. We need the policing adjusted. All of these things go together in the 4 pillars. I think also that there would need to be consultation with the community in Oak Bay Gordon Head. And I wonder if it would be the right place, because I don't know how much it's needed in our area. But do I support it? Would I support it if it was something that was needed and the community agree? Absolutely. Because it works.
Thank you. Ida?
So harm reduction initiatives have been supported by our BC Liberal government for the last 12 years because it does include things like education, outreach, it includes health and social support. All of those are important because that does involve getting a person healthy. I have been on the record, I know my colleagues have been on the record, that we actually do support the facility that Andrew mentioned in Vancouver, the Insight that was there. That is a supervised injection site, and it has absolutely shown benefits to help people. And why would we not want to use that model to continue on? But as the issue has been raised about whether we would support one in Oak Bay, Gordon Head, that is very difficult. I would ask those of you who actually live in Oak Bay, Gordon Head to raise your hand and tell me, where do you think it should go? Because as we were trying to find another solution in the Victoria area, every neighborhood was saying no and believed they needed to be consulted. And if you expect the MLA to go in and say it's going to go here regardless, you will have your neighbors knocking on your doors, I think perhaps a little quicker. So we do absolutely need to consult with the neighborhoods, see where it's possible, find the best place for it, because we want the benefits out of that not to be diminished by the anger of the neighborhood.
Thank you. The next question. Average market rent for a bachelor apartment in Greater Victoria is $676. The current income assistance and disability shelter rates are $375 a month. How do you plan to ensure people receiving government assistance have access to housing? And we start this with Andrew.
Well, I mean, you have Coalition actually has put together a pretty fine report on the Housing Procurement Action Plan for March 2012. This is an example of the type of bottom-up driven process that I would actually support. It's very clear that ending homelessness is financially makes sense. Again, touring our place and talking with the program there, what I found is that to have someone on the street costs the system $55,000 a year. To house them upstairs in transitional housing in our houses, our place rather, is between $30,000 and $40,000 a year. And the Streets to Home program is about $8,000 a year, all in, including administration. Makes sense to me that what we need to be doing is supporting those community-based groups that are showing success. And it makes sense to do so. So why wouldn't we? I mean, the evidence is there. Thanks.
Thank you. Jessica.
Thank you. Obviously, this is not an adequate amount of money for housing anybody. Obviously. It's impossible. And one of the things that I'm planning to be in a new NDP government is a strong voice at the table to take care of situations like this. And it's something that you'll hear more about in the next few days. There'll be more of our platform on housing coming out in the newspaper, and I'm hopeful about it, that it will be helpful. We understand the importance of investing in a wide range of housing in Greater Victoria. There's not one-size-all-fits solution. And we also are planning to do a thorough review of the rules about getting to income assistance. For example, right now you have to do a 5-week work search before you qualify for income assistance. That's 2 rent checks if you're out of money, right? So that's a lot of where people get launched into homelessness from, is that 5-week work search after you've already run out of money. And we can change those kind of regulations. I spoke to Carol James about it, our social development critic, and she said there's a plan to do a review of those sorts of regulations that put people in impossible situations.
Ida.
What I can say is that my understanding is that since 2001, more than 21,000 housing units, affordable housing units, have been added to the housing stock. Of that, about 950 have been here in Greater Victoria alone. I believe another 68 are underway. I just made a note of a number of the places that I have visited and seen or been a part of. There's Clover Place, Camas Gardens, Rock Bay Landing, Olympic Vista, Swift House, Queens Manor. These are all new forms of housing that government has been able to partner with local nonprofit organizations, working with local municipalities as well, to build the right housing stock in the right area and to provide it at an affordable level. It's perhaps easy to talk about, well, how much money is enough or how much money is not enough, but what we sometimes don't realize is, why is there not enough housing? Is it because land is scarce, as it is in Victoria, or in Saanich, or in Oak Bay? Who is going to be building this housing? So we do have an obligation to work with local governments, municipalities, to find out whether they have surplus land, whether they have underutilized properties, and that's what we've been doing for the past number of years, and that's why we've had success. And we have worked with the coalition, indeed, to find those underutilized properties, to repurpose them into affordable housing units, and also to provide the support services that people need when they get there.
Great.
Yes, I like this idea of working cooperatively with other organizations within the community to provide public housing solutions to end homelessness. And in fact, I've worked on a couple of those myself, one in the Eastern Arctic and one in the Western Arctic. And I found that they were highly successful, particularly if they involved other portions of the community. It wasn't just strictly a government-run organization, and they were putting up community housing. So, similar to what my colleagues have said, I would support a form of joint action in order to be able to provide adequate housing for people. I will also say that the funding for that kind of housing could be made available through the provincial government if they cut out some of the wasteful spending that they have been doing. A real good example of that, it says in the report here that $13 million would be required to end homelessness in Greater Victoria. Well, $20 million was spent by the Pacific Carbon Trust, money taken away from basically schools, universities, colleges, and hospitals. Well, if that money was funneled into adequate housing, we wouldn't have a housing problem, a homelessness problem in Greater Victoria. So I think a better use of public funds, rather than giving Encana $6 million for the underbalanced drilling program, would be to funnel that money into providing adequate housing.
Time.
Sure.
The next question. Taking into consideration the jurisdictorial issues relating to Aboriginal housing on reserve, what can you or your government do, if elected, to work towards addressing the disproportionate numbers of Aboriginal individuals and families that are experiencing or at risk of homelessness and reside off reserve? We are starting with Jessica.
I think that increasing the supports for families, and particularly families with lone parents, is a really important piece of this puzzle. I don't think, once Aboriginal families are off reserve, I think that they are entitled to the same programs that anybody else is entitled to in our society. It's difficult to say, with my limited understanding of the challenges to Aboriginal people living in urban areas, it's difficult for me to say how that would be different. So the things that I've spoken about, reducing child poverty, reducing inequality, the programs that we've got here for supports for housing and supports for people with children, particularly single parents. Another piece of the puzzle is that child support gets clawed back when people are on welfare. And if somebody is a lone parent and they're getting child support from the other parent, that should not be clawed back. It makes it very difficult for families to function that way.
Thank you. Ida.
Housing on Aboriginal territories is definitely the responsibility of the federal government because of the reserves, because there are non-treaties, which is one of the reasons why our government is working so hard to deal with First Nations and getting a treaty settled. Because when you have a treaty in place, an Aboriginal community comes out from under the Indian Act and they have their own choices. They will be given land and they will be given money. They can make decisions, choices on how to develop their community. But those who leave their reserves and do end up in urban communities, you're absolutely right. The province then becomes responsible for helping them in their social issues, and housing being one of them. The federal government recently agreed to devolve housing to the provinces for Aboriginal communities. We're the only province in British Columbia, and this is why we lead in so many ways, and sometimes it gets overlooked. We have not taken that stock and said we will control it. We actually have turned that over to it's called AMA, the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, and they deal with 40 other Aboriginal organizations that are now managing They are housing providers that are managing that housing stock. So here we have a federal government who says to the province, you guys can take over this. We said, you know what? We are going to trust this Aboriginal Housing Management Association to do this and empower them to do so. That's a good step forward.
Great.
I'd have to agree with Ida that empowering First Nation groups to build their own houses and manage and look after them is the best possible solution. My two experiences that I referred to in my opening remarks were, one of them was in the Eastern Arctic, where Inuit people were living in very cramped type conditions, where there were 15 people in a 3-bedroom house, very horrible. They obviously needed new housing. Northwest Territories Housing Corporation was going to bring people up from the south to construct these houses. I, on a volunteer basis, incorporated a 100% Inuit-owned construction company who bid on successfully on the construction of that 25-unit subdivision and built those houses themselves. The money stayed in the hands of the Inuit people in the community, and the profit they made from the construction of those houses was used to purchase heavy equipment, which they then bid on successfully for the annual sea-lift contract, so they ended up getting an annual income out of their efforts as well. Another program that I thought was very innovative and highly unique was in the Western Arctic, where drilling companies would go up and they would have these large trailers that they house their employees in while they're doing their drilling programs. At the end of the drilling programs, those trailers are hauled back down south and disposed of. The program that I initiated was to have the original trailers built so that they could be converted into 3-bedroom, single-family dwellings for a minimum cost of about $35,000, which was quite a bit less than the $180,000 that the Northwest Territories Housing Corporation was paying.
Andrew.
Thanks. I would like to ask if there's anyone in the room of Aboriginal descent. Okay, I think you'll agree with me that part of the problem is a question like this posed to us here without first asking you what the problems are and how you'd solve it. I think, my own opinion is that the Indian Act is like a sentence to poverty for the First Nations in our country. I think most people of First Nations would agree with that. What I would do as an elected official was contact my very good friend and colleague Anna Molson from the Sartlet First Nation, running for the Green Party in Saanich, north in the islands. And I would ask him to help and try to address this question. I recognize that it is a federal jurisdiction, the housing on reservation land, but I also recognize that the solutions must be brought forward by the first people of our living in Canada, because, and I believe that we need to actually listen to them and actually introduce the solutions as advocated by them. We're blessed in British Columbia to have Sean Atrio as somebody from our province who can actually influence the Federation through direct knowledge of what's going on here in BC. He was on the climate action team that I was part of a number of years ago, and I think we have a possible voice into the Federation through Sean Atrio. So again, I think this solution must be bottom up. I think the Indian Act needs to be changed. That's a federal jurisdiction, but the provinces can lobby on behalf and in concert with the First Nations in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. The next question will be starting with Ida. Actually, 2 questions, but it's the same. What is your plan to address the problem of youth transitioning out of foster care into homelessness? And how do you plan to fix the broken foster care system? Yeah, so what is your plan to address the problem of youth transitioning out of foster care into homelessness?
Well, I would expect that currently those who are in foster care have case counselors who are working with them because they're if they're not part of the family permanently, there would be case workers assigned to them. In that regard, there would be a plan that is in place to allow them to consider whether they're going on to further their education, whether it's in post-secondary or whether they're looking to be trained in a vocation to look for some jobs. I don't think that we can have, a one-size-fits-all solution for all individuals who are in foster care. It is a difficult situation because there are different circumstances which bring an individual or child into foster care. But my understanding is that there are caseworkers who work with those youths to make sure that there is a plan. Some of them will stay or can stay with the families that they are with. Others will move on as, I guess, the young people in all homes move on, whether they decide to, as I say, continue on with education or look for a work. If they are looking for work, we certainly want to make sure that they have access to jobs, which is one of the reasons why creation of jobs is so important.
Thank you. Great.
Well, it's a sad fact that most of the youth in foster care homes end up are from Aboriginal backgrounds, a disproportionate number of them are. And so I would try and incorporate some understanding to those people of their ethnic background so that they get an appreciation for their Aboriginal heritage and try and move them into society with a broader understanding of their Aboriginal heritage, make them proud of their Aboriginal heritage, and allow them to move forward with a sense of confidence. Unfortunately, we don't have a great record in terms of taking care of children in foster care in BC. Children and Youth Advocate has trashed the government and social services quite hard on a number of different occasions. In the way that these people have been looked after, or rather not looked after. So I would improve the role of the advocate to cover these youths that are transitioning out of foster care and into mainstream society.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you. The question is specific with respect to the transitioning from foster care, but it's an identical problem with the transitioning from mental illness and an identical problem for the transitioning of youth with special needs. Once children move from the youth to adulthood, the system lets them go. And there's one path. The path is to, well, there's not one path. One possible path is the path towards future life of turmoil, perhaps leading to homelessness. It's a question of societal priorities. To me, when I grew up, we didn't see this in Victoria. To me, it's telling me that within society, we are no longer valuing our social programs as much as we did. I actually think this is a high priority, and I would like to work towards seeing better transitioning put in place. It is strictly a question of resources. And when it is a question of resources, it's a question of priorities. And to me, dealing with this is a priority, and therefore we need the resources to ensure that the transition exists, so that care doesn't stop when you hit 19, whether you have special needs, mental illness, or you're in the foster care program and you're turfed out on the street. Relying on perhaps having a supportive home is not enough, and clearly in the foster care program, it doesn't exist. So, well, it could exist, but typically doesn't exist. So it's a question of resources, simply making a priority, and that's what I believe we need to do. And I say that out of deepest sincerity, because it is a scar on our society when we see homelessness, when we see people transitioning to no transition onto the streets.
The next question, starting with Jessica. Oh, I'm sorry.
You can answer this one.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. There's several things that have already been brought out in the NDP's plan that will help with this considerably. As all of my colleagues have stated, it's a big, complex problem. So our number one priority is education, because the best way that we can help people grow to be independent and healthy adults is to improve their education life. So in the K-12 system, we're going to be hiring 1,000 new people. There'll be teachers, teaching assistants for people with special needs, teacher librarians, and counselors. And it adds another layer of support to vulnerable children, like children who are in foster care, who sometimes do well and sometimes are very vulnerable. The other thing that's going to happen is that we are adding frontline social workers. They're going to be added up 5%. About 130 more will be hired in the province. So the caseloads will be a little bit smaller, and that means social workers will have more time to support people with their transitions. Review of Community Living BC, which we're going to be doing, will make a difference as well. And the BC Liberals in their budget cut the funding to Community Living BC over 3 years. We're going to restore some of that money, particularly for adults with disabilities, because you get more every year as they age into the system. So the problem or the challenge is growing even as the funding was being cut. That can't happen.
Time.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jessica, I was glancing at the wrong list.
No, that's all right. I'm sorry I sound like this. It's allergies.
Starting with Greg, the next question. The Ministry of Social Development or Welfare Office is widely accepted as a destructive force in the lives of most poor people who interact with it. What would your party do to reform this ministry?
Well, I think the main thing we would do would be to improve access to social services and welfare. I have a number of constituents in my neighborhood who are living single family with two kids, and they're working. So they don't really have the kind of time available to be able to access all of the services that they want to do. Can't take time off from work, and when they're off work, they're busy looking after children. So I think the first thing we would do is we would improve access to benefits under the welfare system.
Thank you. Andrew?
This is an issue that I think deserves a thoughtful response. One that I'm not familiar with in terms of what is the destructive aspect of this relationship. So again, I don't think it's for me to give you a response that's not thoughtful would be inappropriate. What I would say I would do is I would go and ask the experts on the field, what is the actual barriers? What is it about the welfare office that's destructive? And seek to remove those barriers. As I said, we're solutions-based, and that's what I bring as a scientist to the political framework is you find the problem, you try to solve it. And to me, I'm not sure what the specific details are, and so I would like to search those out before I provide an answer that's not thoughtful.
Thank you. Jessica?
Just very briefly, I think that what we are going to do is do a review of all the rules that are in the Ministry of Children and Family Development, the Ministry of Social Development, and some of those rules are part of the problem. They're really some crazy rules in there. So that will be, for example, people who are applying to get on disabilities. It's a 23-page form. What is that? So reviewing that sort of thing will make the ministry more accessible and more functional. And then the other thing, of course, is the accountability piece and transparency piece. And doing the review of Community Living BC will help as well. When you have an arm's length organization, you have to make sure that the avenues of accountability are clear. And that will be a big, big difference for those ministries as well. Thank you.
And Ida?
I too would like to perhaps understand more of the nature of the question, if there are specifics with respect to what is the destructive nature that I guess the questioner is asking about. If it's about the individual not being able to have access to services, or it's because they're in disagreement with the rates, that can all be discussed and that can all be dealt with. But if it's something much deeper, absolutely it's important to know what that is. What I'm hearing though from some of my colleagues here though is if the solution is more money to solve a problem, and if the solution is to keep people on social assistance, then I would have to say I would disagree with that. I would want to see people transition out of social assistance. I would want to see people be able to get jobs where they can do better for themselves and their family. But I don't believe that a success is measured by how many people you keep on social assistance.
Thank you. Our next question, starting with Andrew. We'll actually take one of these, one of our Twitter questions. The second one down. What are the candidates' opinions on community-based organizations versus blanket welfare, and what would you do?
Okay, this are a whole set central tenet of our platform is the solutions are often based in the community. So we look to the coalition. You are on the ground. You are the experts, not the politicians in the legislature. We look to other organizations that are working in this regard. So in our whole approach, it's a bottom-up approach to governance, recognizes the solutions are there in the community. So to this, do I community-based versus blanket welfare? I'm a big fan, and the party is a big fan of focusing on community-based solutions. That's the most effective use of resources, I would argue, because you tailor the solution to the individual community as opposed to have a one-size-fits-all model. A solution in Victoria may work in Victoria, but may not work in Nanaimo, it may not work in Prince George. You have different constituencies, etc. In terms of what you would do, it would be clearly to work with and engage these community and ask them what the solutions are as they, and work with them to try to implement them. That, I think, is our role as legislators.
Thank you. Jessica?
There has to be accountability in central government for this. Our poverty reduction strategy calls for targets and timelines, and the central government has to be accountable for it. Yes, we need to consult with communities on what those communities feel is the strongest solution, but you will have massive inequality between wealthy communities with citizens that can afford to donate more money and poor communities that can't. So the ultimate responsibility must rest with government. Consulting on what will be done is great. What I saw sitting on the board of a small NGO, the Mary Manning Center, was that the ultimate accountability started to rest with the organization that simply did not have the capacity to serve the hundreds and hundreds of children that came in need of counseling for sexual abuse, for extreme physical abuse. That is our responsibility. That's what provincial government does. That's why I'm running at this level of government. It should never be a question of luck whether that child gets help.
Just want to make sure I got the question. I am absolutely in support of community-based organizations being involved in helping to find the solutions, because government as a whole, as someone had already indicated, maybe are not always the best ones to provide the services needed in the community. It's important that we engage our community-based organizations, and I'm very pleased that I had a meeting with the Community Action Initiative not so long ago, and that government funds that organizations. Recently, I believe they received about $15 million to support their ongoing operations. And these are the community-based organizations that work across the province, in all regions of the province, to help and find out what is specifically challenging. They deal with mental health and substance use challenges. They deal with social support services. Those are what are important aspects of using our community-based organizations. They provide a valuable service. They achieve benefits far greater than what governments are able to do, and that's one of the reasons why they continue to be supported by our government and should be.
Thank you. Great.
Oh yes, I'm very much in favor of community-based action in terms of dealing with some of these problems. I think a real fine example of that is surrounded by Siberia, which I was associated with. Here's a group of First Nations people, all trained and certificated in delivering social services, dealing with urban Aboriginal youth. Well, plainly, First Nations people are better able to understand the problems of Aboriginal youth than governments are. So certainly, I think it's best that local communities get actively involved in the deliverance of these services.
Thank you. The next question, starting with Jessica. Are you in favor of a guaranteed livable income for BC?
In the long run, yes, but it will not be possible in our first term, not with the fiscal mess, to be candid, that we're being left by the BC level of government. But in the long run, yes, I am personally.
Well, actually, if we have a strong economy and we have people who are working in jobs, then I don't believe we need to be thinking about what is a absolute living income. I think that's the terminology that has been used. Those who are most vulnerable, those who are not able to help themselves, are the ones that we need to be able to use our dollars to assist. The idea of a civil society is that those who are able to help those less vulnerable, I think, is still what we all believe in, which I believe in. But we need to have people who are working, who are paying taxes, and who are able to use those dollars to help those who cannot help themselves.
The only trouble with that, Ida, is you refuse to raise, well, you refuse to raise the minimum wage for 12, 11 years.
Let's
How
have
can
some
you have
order here.
any kind of income on $8 an hour?
It's higher than that right now.
Great.
Second highest in the country.
The question.
Well, for disadvantaged people, people on pensions and have those who have disabilities, certainly they require a livable income in order to be able to survive. And of course, it's different in each community. The amount of money you need to survive in Nanaimo is different than what you need to survive in Vancouver, and is different from what you need in Kelowna. So I think we need a better handle on where these people are and what kind of lifestyles that they're going to encounter in the communities in which they live. So would I guarantee a flat amount? I would say no. It should be done on a community-by-community basis and be adjusted based on the kinds of environments in which these people live.
Thank you. Andrew?
The answer is an unequivocal yes, and this is one of the central platforms of our party, is we believe that a livable wage is what a civil modern society would aim and strive towards. So we would like to do that as soon as possible. We recognize that the livable wage in a city like Vancouver is quite different from the livable wage in a city like Parksville. You can buy a house in Parksville for $220,000. You cannot buy a house in Victoria for $220,000. So absolutely we're in support of that.
Thank you. The next question, and again, these questions all come from people who are here in the room. They've submitted yellow cards, so thank you all for submitting questions. The next question, starting with Ida, is name initiatives that you and your party would undertake to strengthen and support nonprofit housing in Greater Victoria and BC. They've actually said name 3 initiatives.
Well, our government has had a number of initiatives. We have our provincial homelessness initiative, our housing initiative, which partners with our BC Housing and with a number of nonprofit organizations that build affordable housing. We have our action teams that have been out there. These are new initiatives since our government has had the ability to provide for these initiatives. An action team that goes out, outreach workers who find people who are homeless to make sure that they are able to get the support that they need to find safe housing for them. We have also initiated the Streets to Home program, which I think the coalition is aware of as well, which has helped, I think, 400 people as well. So there are a number of initiatives, and these have all come about as a result of us being in government since 2001. I will still say, is there more that can be done? Absolutely. Are we going to work with our partners in the nonprofit organizations and local government? Absolutely. And that's how we've achieved success. It's not because government has done it all on their own. It's because we have developed good partnerships in the community. And I think that's essential.
Great.
Well, the Conservative Party believes that getting people employed is probably the best way to combat some of these problems. So that would be our initial initiative, is we would like to increase employment. But we do recognize that there is an increasing burden for chronic illness, and we support initiatives for better care of these patients, resulting in fewer complications and a better quality of life. We also think that there are a lot of problems in the mental health area, and we would look for the supportive development of effective and affordable mental health and addiction initiatives for British Columbians. We support similar types of programs, again, all dealing with becoming self-sufficient within the community. And for those that are unable to be self-sufficient in the community, we would take a close look at the kinds of initiatives that are currently in place and look to broaden and expand. We're not going to change government hugely if the Conservatives are elected, but we will make those changes significant and important.
Thank you. Andrew?
Could I ask to repeat the question, because it was
Sure.
specific?
No problem. As it was written, name 3 initiatives that you and your party will undertake to strengthen and support nonprofit housing in Greater Victoria and BC.
Okay, thank you. I would like to see, at the provincial level, a non-partisan standing committee on poverty put forward, actually to re-engage the legislative committee structure, which has simply gone awry in the last few years. Number one. Number two, as a consequence, you need to have a liaison between such a standing committee and the local organizations, something like an ombudsperson, where you can actually have you can bring the issues to the committee and back and forth. And finally, it's about resources. It really is about access to resources. Many of these ideas exist as to how to solve this, and it's a question about availability of resources. And that's a question of priorities, and I think this is a priority. So there's 3.
Yes, thank you. Our housing platform will be unveiled in the coming week, so you will be able to look at it on the bcndp.ca website. You can word search anything you like on that website, and you'll find the press releases fully costed and properly organized, rolling out. What I will say in general is that it's part of our capital planning, which is what you're going to see. The BC Liberal focus has been on temporary shelter beds largely. They're important, but they're not a permanent solution. A mat on a church floor is not a solution. So we need to do that. It's clear that we need a national housing strategy. And I think what has been happening with previous governments is that everyone's waiting for the national housing strategy. We can't wait. This is an emergency. We've got to get something done right now. And you'll see this coming out in the platform. I was researching with my researcher before I came to this meeting, and we looked on the BC Liberal website to see. We searched the words poverty, child poverty, and homelessness, and there were no hits on that website.
Thank you. Our next question, starting with Greg. It's a short one, so it might just be a yes or no. And feel free to elaborate as you will. Again, a question from the people here. Will your party support Woodwind Farms in Central Saanich?
Oh, yes, I'm quite sure we do.
Okay.
Oh, more than yes. This is a fantastic idea, and it just needs to be a model to build upon elsewhere in BC. So I think, yes, unequivocally.
Jessica?
I don't see why not. I think it's up to, again, the community and to that MLA to make sure that the project is working well and so on, but I don't see why not. I think being creative and innovative about housing and about transitioning people into work and giving people a healthy environment in which to grow their lives and launch their lives is very important.
Very good. Ida?
I think it's probably a unanimous yes. I think we all want to support it, and the reason why it perhaps is not successful is not because of a lack of will from a higher level of government. I think there are some local issues which have prevented it from being a success, and I think it's because, again, it's about the local community where it's housed, which is creating some of the problem. And I think what it would be important then is for MLAs to work with that community and find out how we can make it a success, because I think we all believe in the principle of what it provides.
Thank you. Quick answers. Our next question, starting with Andrew. It's a scenario. So here we go. Were you ever down to your last dollar? If yes, how did you escape poverty? And if no, how did you escape poverty? Interesting. I'll ask it again.
That's a really good question, and the reason why I'm thinking is that I was a student like everyone else, and my parents were not wealthy. And I'm thinking about the year I was in. I was never down to my last dollar. And what I've always tried personally to live within my means. I've been close, but I was never there. So the answer is no, I haven't been down to my last dollar. I've worked some pretty amazing, it's hard to answer this because how didn't I get there? Well, because I decided to work, I played, any kids here? No. I was Santa Claus in a restaurant. right? To try to earn money to stay at university. I worked in an ice factory in Granton, in Edinburgh. If anyone knows about that, so this is where people go there, and not all of them actually live to they're 24 years old. I worked cutting down trees on the island of Jura, digging a pipeline. So I was doing any job I could find because I was close to being, but I wasn't there. So I haven't been there. But in order to not be there, I just worked wherever I could work.
Thank you.
And I'm fortunate. I mean, I recognize that I'm fortunate because I did not suffer from special needs. I did not suffer from mental illness. I had a caring family. And I would know that if I actually did struggle, they would have stepped in. But not everybody has that, which is why you need those safety nets, which is throwing in another answer to the first question.
Thank you. Jessica?
No, I grew up in immense privilege. I've been very fortunate my whole life. I've traveled around the world and seen what poverty is. And I've seen what happens when there aren't health care and social services and public education. And how rapidly a society can destabilize when poverty becomes rampant and when there aren't health care and social services and public ed. My father came here from Shanghai with the shirt on his back and one suitcase. And he said the reason that he was able to take the chances that he took in business and the chances that he took in his career was because he always knew us kids would have an education and have good health care. And he never forgot. He instilled those values in my family, and I'm happy to say that I'm the kid that got the pony. But I'm also the kid that gets it.
I don't know how to say whether I was ever down to my last dollar, but as a youngster, I think I was probably down to my last nickel. I grew up with 8 children, a grandmother, a mother, and father, in about a 1,000-square-foot home with 1 bathroom, and where we had to go outside to light the furnace to heat the house. Our house was expropriated by the government. I did come from a very underprivileged family, but my mother and father taught me if you work hard, government should not take everything you have, you can still give back to others, and you can still work and appreciate what you have. So I may never have had that last dollar, but I came close to having that last nickel.
Well, not to make light of it, but just let me check my wallet here. I'm pretty sure I am down to my last. And my plan to get out of that rather horrible situation is to get elected as MLA. But if I do get elected as MLA, I guarantee that I will send much of that money back into the community in the form of donations to worthwhile organizations of the kind that are represented here today.
Thank you. So on to the next question, starting with Jessica. Legal aid has been cut by 40% over the past decade. How do you think that has impacted on low-income British Columbians? And what would you do to ensure improved access to justice?
Yes. It was a momentous day in British Columbia's history when the tax on every legal transaction in this province used to go to legal aid. And this government, the BC Liberal government, took that money out of the legal aid fund, that tax on every legal transaction, and put it in general revenue. And we've been going downhill since then. Access for people who don't have much money to legal help has been diminished dramatically. I think probably one of the most important ways that it's affected citizens in British Columbia is in the area of family law. Because people don't have access to the courts, and they don't have access to remedies, whether it's a relationship breakup or whether it's something far more complex. Family conflicts that would require the intervention of the law at any level are some of the most dangerous conflicts that you could have in a family. We know we've lost people in Obey Gordon Head because of these things. It's essential that we rebuild the supports for people to have access. There will be more announcements in the coming week about this. It's also very important that people have help with that 23-page form to be able to apply to be classified as disabled so they can get more income assistance. There's so many different ways that access to a lawyer is the difference between a democracy and a not democracy. And it's part of our determination to restore democracy to make sure that people have access to the law.
I don't think anyone would question why there should not be access to legal services if you are requiring it. And I think that is a fundamental that we all want. The question I have is why is it that people are having to access so much assistance? Is it because our court systems are not working for them? Rather than going to see a lawyer for one day or half a day or a few hours, having to go back week after week because you cannot get your case heard in the court, if that is what is costing the system more, that is where we have to find out what is, that is part of the problem. I do believe that there was a review underway and that there are recommendations, and the Minister for Justice has said that we intend to act on those recommendations, and that is a mechanism, a way to move, allow people to move through the courts much quicker and allow them, therefore, for resolution to take place. If you have quicker resolution, I think we were able then to manage the amount of accessibility as well. So it's not just as a simple whether or not we're going to increase funding. Today I've heard an awful lot of increasing funding, but I've not heard how the revenues are going to come in for that.
Well, one of the charities I started was the Center for Income Security and Employment Association. This was an organization that would have clients who were denied benefits under age and EI. And so what we had was a bunch of volunteer lawyers on staff. The charity employed them. And these people who were either disabled or had been wrongfully denied their EI benefits would come to us. And we would actively represent them in the courts and with the various institutions that had previously denied them these kinds of claims. That shouldn't have to happen in our society. People should have access to legal representation, especially when they feel they've been wrongfully denied benefits to which they were certainly entitled. So I would say that it's the government's responsibility and would look towards funding that. I know the BC Conservatives are strong on justice, but you can't have justice if you're not represented by a lawyer.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thanks. It's very clear to me that ability to pay is a barrier to the legal system. It's very, very clear to me. This leads to inequity in law, because those who can afford the high-paid lawyers are those that ultimately win the cases. So it is another question of priority, and I believe the government could be creative on this, and so absolutely legal aid needs to be increased, and legal aid should be a right for everyone. Now, with that said, there's ways of thinking about doing things differently. You might, for example, negotiate with big law firms and say, if you want to do legal business with us, the province, a percentage of your legal practice must actually be to legal aid. These are ways that are done elsewhere around the world. In Britain, for example, with healthcare, they require doctors to also work in the public healthcare system. So I don't see why we couldn't start to explore these other new ways of providing legal aid, but absolutely it must be a priority, because the system is not fair as it now stands. And I know that from first-hand experience. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 2 questions left, and I think we should thank the candidates for giving us their time today. And thank you all, too, for giving the questions. So here we are. Next question, and we start with Ida. What is an MLA able to do to prevent homelessness of an individual who is short rent money, facing immediate eviction? What is an MLA able to do to prevent homelessness of someone who is short rent money and facing immediate eviction?
I'm not sure if the asker is still in the room, but it sounds like a red bank question. Is that a red bank question? asker was interested in. Sounds like a red tape question, I think.
And I'm just, again, wanting to make sure I understand, because if it was just an individual circumstance and that they had issues with a landlord, which I've dealt with in the past, what we do is we try to intervene, and we try to find a negotiated solution, and try to, in some case, if it's an eviction, extend that time frame so someone can stay in that place longer and find a solution to help them. If it's sometimes emergency needs that they have, which I've also been able to do in my time as an MLA, to find some emergency dollars so that they can meet perhaps that rent before being evicted. So I'm not clear on exactly the situation, but I guess what I can say, as an MLA, I have been accessible to those kinds of situations. I have helped people specifically in individual cases. That is perhaps one of the most rewarding jobs of being an MLA. It's not the large policy issues that you get involved in. It is the day-to-day individual MLA's job to talk to your constituents who come into you, and you try your very best to find an answer, a solution. You navigate the government system that has been in place well before I got there, and you find the right agency, the right program, the right service to help them, and you do what you can. Sometimes you are successful, sometimes you are not, and you try to be more successful more often than not.
Great.
Could you read your question again?
Sure. What is an MLA able to do to prevent homelessness of an individual who is short rent money and is facing immediate eviction?
Well, I suppose if there weren't any other avenues available as described by my colleague Ida, I could always take the money out of my own pocket and give it to them.
I thought there was only $1 there.
You have to vote me in to get me to do it.
And
I would chuckle at that because, you know, I actually know Greg, and I actually believe he would do that. So I've met him on this campaign trail, so I actually believe him when he says that. You know, as an MLA, one should advocate on behalf of your constituents. I've done this at the university for faculty who are unable to advocate on behalf of themselves. I've done it in the community for many, many years. It is one of the most rewarding things you can do as an individual, is to help those who are unable to help themselves. That is my commitment for running. It's one of the reasons why I am running, is I think it is something I can do and do well, and I would enjoy doing it. So what could I do? I would work with that person to find access to the system, to ensure that they were able to get engaged with the appropriate people or the appropriate agencies that would allow them to not get evicted. We in the Green Party believe we need to reestablish rental tenancy offices throughout the province. They've been closed down. We think that that's important, to give tenants access to the RTOs. And we can take a good hard look at the rental tenancy agreements to ensure that eviction is not easy. It's not very easy now. You can't just be evicted at the end of the month, but it could be a little stronger too. And I know that as somebody who has been in the past and in the present a landlord, and actually provided subsidized housing by for years, providing housing at well below market rent. Just so you know, we had a 4-bedroom house on Mackenzie that we rented out for $1,300 a month because we knew we were renting it to people who couldn't afford it. We've been doing that for very, very many years, and the same thing with another place in Parksville. People can do that stuff.
Jessica?
Yes, there's actually money for this. There's something called the Rental Assistance Program that the Liberals created. And the trouble with it is that the eligibility criteria are incredibly stringent, really stringent. You can't get it, you have to have under 35,000 gross household income, which sounds like lots until you find out how many kids somebody has, right? Or what kind of needs they have, or if they're supporting an aging parent, or all of the other things that $35,000 doesn't go very far for anymore. There are also, and you must have children. You're not allowed if you're on income assistance or disability, or you're living in a co-op, or you're living in subsidized housing. You must have a dependent child. So it's about that big review of those policies that we have pledged to do. Some of these rules are just funny rules. The money is sitting there, but people can't get at it because the rules are too tight. So we can review that, we can fix that. It's great, the money's already there, let's use it.
and final question for the day. I believe this is question number 15. So good work, all of you. Starting with Greg. Because we're at the University of Victoria right now, somebody has asked the question, what would you do to address student poverty?
Oh, good question. Well, of course, student poverty resides on a lot of levels. First of all, you need housing for students, and to make sure that whatever incomes they do have, or whatever resources they do have, are not swallowed up by just putting a roof over their head. Second thing that we would do is we would expand the scholarship program to ensure that those people who are qualified and go to university have the necessary resources to enable them to do so without feeling the pinch of the almighty dollar. In my neighborhood, I think every second house on my block it has university students staying in there. So those people are subsidizing their mortgage payments by having university students rent out these tiny little basement suites. So we need to get better on-campus housing. I think that would be a really good start, to be able to house people adequately so they have a place to live without having to worry about where the next campus could come.
And
Thank you. The University of Victoria is actually, as I mentioned, done 4 candidates meetings, I believe, or I have in the last couple of days, is unique in Canada in terms of access to scholarship funding. This is an institutional decision that was made here at the University of Victoria. Other universities do not provide the same kind of level of scholarship funding. That's another priority within the institutions. So UVIC does believe it's a priority to provide scholarships, but that's not enough. Because we do have a student grant-based system, loan-based system in the province of British Columbia, but such a system needs to be extended to add, on top of that, a needs-based grant system. So that you actually, as you graduate, based on future earnings and the ability to pay, you would have a component of your loan forgiven as a grant. This is the type of way I think we can move forward to deal with this. The biggest issue for students here at the University of Victoria is housing. UVIC has promised every single student who wants to come access to a room in residence. While that's expensive, it's not as expensive as some of the market housing that's out there. But we can do better, and one of the ways, as I said, is through the grant and scholarship and system. Yeah.
thank you. Jessica?
We have in our platform a combined student loan grant program. It's fully costed, and it would make a huge difference because when you give people a grant, which is money for free, obviously if you qualify for a student loan, you need money. So we're going to give a combination of student loans and grants. It takes away barriers for people to get started in post-secondary education in the first place, and it also reduces their debt at the end of their post-secondary education career. Right now, the average debt in British Columbia is $27,000. It's unacceptable. It's also important because lots of students work their way through university, and that's a great thing, to work a few hours a week. Unfortunately, we've lost 34,800 jobs since the BC Jobs Plan was implemented by the BC Liberals, so it's tough to get work. It's ridiculous. So the combination student loan grant program will help, I think, a great deal in taking away barriers to post-secondary education that will lead to ladders of opportunity for the better in students' future.
Ina?
So the question was about student poverty right here at the University of Victoria. I think some of the candidates have already expressed a couple of ideas, and that is with respect to scholarships and with housing. And I agree that the University of Victoria has done a very good job in terms of ensuring that every first-year student who needs housing will have a place here on campus. It's what happens after that. And if it were to be expanded to a second or third year for housing, I think what needs to happen is a good discussion with the university, because every time you want to build additional housing, which is what we would need to do here on the campus, it takes away from another technical building or another another modern state-of-the-art engineered building or whatever it may be. Whether or not more housing can be built on the campus, I don't know. I can tell you that I've seen other campuses other universities struggle with this, with the students and the neighborhood when more housing comes in place. But I have seen a huge, significant increase in student housing here. I would agree that scholarships do help students, and I think we do find that not only the university can provide those scholarships, but businesses who have done particularly well have endowed and provided endowments to this university because they have believed in it, and that's a good track record we have. Lastly, I would just say this. We do have a BC Student Loan Forgiveness Program where 100% of the student loan is actually forgiven if the student is prepared to move into an underserved area of the province for that particular profession. It's not easy to move away from home, but we have underserved areas. We educate young people, but we need them in other parts of the province. If they go there in 3 years, that loan will be paid off.
Thank you. So once again, I would like to, on behalf of the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, thank very much the candidates for taking your time out and speaking to the people that are here. There's a lot of great questions. And just as a small token of thanks, we have here the Hope and Shadows calendar. There we go. And also listening as well. Sorry?
We're not going to close any works, or we're going to... It's okay,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Okay, you guys have spoken. You guys have spoken well. So thank you all for coming, and
Thank you all very much.
Great.